Okay, good morning everybody. I'm sure you've all figured it out already, but if you could get your headsets at the ready so you are ready to listen to the interpretation, that would be great. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Barrais Bendall. I'm the Operations Director at the Rivers Trust, and I have the pleasure of chairing this first session this morning. And you'll also get to see me again later, so no such thing as a free lunch for me today. Firstly, I'd like to thank all of you for joining today's conference, both to all of you in the room and those of you online. I think there's quite a few people online over in France and elsewhere in England and probably some other locations too. Just by way of a very quick introduction, I was lucky enough to be involved in the development of the Water for Tomorrow project at the start. I've taken quite a sort of step back since the project got going and we had far more able people involved to lead the project forward. But I'm really looking forward to today's conference and to hear about the progress and achievements of the project and how we take forward the legacy of Water for Tomorrow as we move beyond the project end. I'd also like to thank all of those involved in organising this event, particularly Gwen and Becca, who seem to make these things look extremely easy with the technology, and I can assure you it isn't. We've got an excellent lineup of speakers representing most of the partners in the Water for Tomorrow project today, and I'm sure there will be some excellent presentations that will provoke some really good quality questions and discussion throughout the day, both in the panel sessions, but also please take the time to talk to the speakers and the project partners during the breaks as well. I'd like to thank you all in advance for your active participation in today's conference. I hope that you have a really enjoyable day. And before we get into the technical content, I've got just a few housekeeping notices that I need to give you all. The first of those is that there are no planned fire drills today. So if the alarm goes off, it's the real thing. So don't panic, but head out through the fire escape straight over there. And I think the muster location is down at Waterloo Bridge, down the stairs and out of the exit. Toilet-wise, I believe the ladies' toilets are off to the left and the gents down to the right. Wi-Fi for those who need it. I think the code is out on the desk outside. I'm not sure there's any codes in here, but you can get it out on the desk. Tea and coffee, I'm sure you've all found that, is served through the boardroom, as is the lunch. You won't have failed to notice the interpretation booth over there. We are running simultaneous interpretation, so please make sure you have your headsets on when the speaker is not in your native tongue. And for those of you online, please make sure you've enabled interpretation on the Zoom call so that you can hear what's going on. I think we've also got captions available for those who would like to see the captions. We're also running Slido today for all of the panel questions, so please make sure you have scanned the QR code for the Slido system. We will not be taking any questions from the floor due to the interpretation and the need for it to come through microphones, so please make sure you use Slido for all of those things. Okay, so on with the show. In a short while, I will say a few words introductory words about the Water for Tomorrow project, mainly from an English partner perspective. And then we will have an immediate test of the technology as we invite contributions from some of our French partners. We'll first have Philippe Scaillerez, who is the Vice President, an elected official of CABBALR, one of the project partners. And that will be followed by some words from Nathalie Barrais, who is the Regional Unit Manager of Drinking Water and Sanitation Service for the Departmental Council of Finistère, who will be joining us live, but from a remote link. So we're really sticking our necks out on the technology. Just a few opening remarks from myself about the Water for Tomorrow project. The project originated from a growing recognition of the fairly major water resource challenges facing many parts of England and similar emerging threats facing parts of northern France. Namely, our ability to access sufficient quantities of water of sufficient quality to meet the demand of all users without adversely impacting on the environment and all the wider societal benefits that a healthy environment provides us. And this is both now and into the future as the impacts of climate change and population growth take hold. I was reflecting this morning on the train that the initial discussions around the Water for Tomorrow project started almost 5 years ago. So it was quite some time in the making, this project. And the concept for the project and the content of the project evolved over a period of a few years against a backdrop of wider developments around water resources. In the UK at least, we had government-led abstraction reform. We had some emerging regional water resources plans from recently established regional water resources planning groups, of which one, WRE, is one of the project partners, of course. We had an emphasis on greater catchment focus for water resources management as part of the catchment-based approach policy framework. And there was an increasing public acknowledgement of the scale and severity of the water resources challenges that lie ahead, perhaps most notably in a 2019 speech by Sir James Bevan, the then Chief Executive of the Environment Agency, entitled Escaping the Jaws of Death, in which he outlined the very real challenges of avoiding large water deficits in parts of England by 2050. Ultimately, all of these things and the dogged commitment and support of several key individuals, many of whom are in the room today, led to the preparation and subsequent approval of the Water for Tomorrow project to the France Channel England Interreg programme. For those of you who have been involved in such things will know this gave rise to a very brief moment of jubilation, followed by the daunting realisation of what needed to be delivered. It goes without saying that such complicated issues as water resources management could never be resolved within a 3-year project. However, the Water for Tomorrow project has represented a significant opportunity for us to make some real progress. By working collaboratively at the transnational level, we have shared experiences and learned a great deal from each other. At the national, regional and catchment level, this has also been a significant opportunity for us to increase the richness of our collaboration, to work outside of normal statutory settings, an opportunity to innovate, to test new approaches and concepts, and to develop new models and tools that would otherwise not have happened. As you will hear later, the majority of the English project activities have focused on 3 catchments in East Anglia: the Cam and Ely Ouse catchment, the Broadland Rivers catchment, and the East Suffolk catchment. These are all catchments that I personally know extremely well, having been born and raised in the first, spent the last 25 years living in the second, and having suffered a long life as a supporter of the local football team in the third. Obviously, my association is not important, but what is important about these 3 catchments is that collectively they represent something of a microcosm of the water resources challenges that we face. The catchments are classified as water scarce, with large parts still in drought following the exceptional, though increasingly common, dry weather we had in 2022. Significant rainfall is now required to replenish the aquifers, rivers and reservoirs in these catchments. They are home to some of England's most precious and protected freshwater habitat, but much of that habitat is degraded and at risk of further deterioration. The agriculture sector is a major part of the local economy, with a high dependency on access to water in the summer for irrigating crops. Populations are set to increase and large parts are at risk from sea level rise and saltwater ingress. Climate change is likely to further exacerbate all of these issues further. In short, these catchments face major water challenges to provide enough water for today. Ensuring there is enough water for tomorrow is an even bigger challenge, and achieving it will require a collaborative and multi-sector approach of the likes that we have never had to date. If the Water for Tomorrow project has taken us a step closer towards achieving these goals, then we can be very proud of our efforts. You will, of course, hear much more about the project and the activities in these catchments from the subsequent speakers and in the panel Q&A. And so to avoid the risk of me giving any spoilers, and in the interest of time, I shall leave it there and just cross my fingers that the technology works okay and we can now hear from Philippe. Thank you.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Merci de m'écouter en distanciel. Je suis désolé de ne pas être en présentiel, mais des obligations professionnelles m'obligent à rester en France. En toute confidentialité, c'est mon directeur de l'eau qui est en train de vous filmer, donc il risque d'y avoir peut-être des petits ratés, mais veuillez nous en excuser par avance. Alors, je tiens à remercier nos différents partenaires, le BRGM, les services de l'Europe, nos partenaires amis anglais, bretons, et aussi mes services de la CABBALR, qui ont contribué à mener une réflexion sur la problématique de l'eau pour demain. Alors, quel est le contexte de l'eau potable avant le projet L'eau pour demain ? Alors, il faut savoir que notre agglomération a repris la compétence eau potable à partir du 1er de janvier 2020, suite à la loi NOTRe, et nous avons donc créé une direction de l'eau potable. Alors, sachez que notre territoire est quand même soumis à une sécheresse récurrente par sa fréquence, mais aussi en intensité. L'eau n'a jamais été véritablement une préoccupation pour nos ex-syndicats qui avaient la compétence de cette eau potable. Alors que nous avons des usages agricoles, industriels qui sont en perpétuelle évolution sur notre territoire, sans oublier que les DUP qui ont été donc déclarations d'utilité publique, qui ont été validées il y a quelques années, ne prennent pas en compte l'évolution actuelle de notre nappe souterraine. Alors cette ressource est touchée par différentes problématiques, à la fois au niveau quantitatif, au niveau qualitatif. Il faut savoir que nous avons sur nos 44 forages, 11 forages qui sont fermés par un défaut de qualité, dû à des pollutions naturelles ou anthropiques, et que nous avons décidé, nous élus de la CABBALR, de définir des conditions d'une gestion raisonnable et raisonnée de notre ressource en eau potable pour les années futures. Au vu de ces problématiques énoncées précédemment, il faut savoir que la CABBALR a développé un projet de territoire axé notamment sur l'eau potable et en fixant différents caps, à savoir préserver la ressource en eau tout en prenant en compte le développement économique et urbain de notre territoire. Il faut savoir aussi que ce projet de territoire n'oublie pas d'approvisionner en quantité et en qualité notre population tout en respectant une tarification sociale et économiquement acceptable pour nos habitants. Le projet de l'eau pour demain a comme objectif de développer un outil de gestion de crise, de nos futures crises et de nos sécheresses, mais aussi d'être un outil d'aide à la décision pour les élus, c'est-à-dire anticiper les sécheresses à venir, mais aussi anticiper les arbitrages potentiels pour le monde agricole, le monde industriel et pour nos habitants. D'autre part, il nous faudra trouver des solutions innovantes pour la gestion de l'eau, mais aussi collaborer avec d'autres organisations, bénéficier ainsi de leur expertise, sans oublier de renforcer notre engagement en faveur de l'environnement, de la protection de l'environnement et du développement durable, en accord avec le projet de territoire initié en 2020. Le programme de travail proposé par la CABBALR et le BRGM va nous permettre d'évaluer l'impact du changement climatique sur les ressources en eau, de prévoir l'évolution des demandes en eau à long terme, de développer des outils et des modèles qui vont permettre de simuler l'impact des différentes règles de gestion du prélèvement. Il nous faudra aussi mettre en place un outil de suivi et de prévision des niveaux d'eau, aussi développer pour les élus de nouvelles stratégies et la gestion des situations de sécheresse, mais aussi impliquer des acteurs de notre territoire dans cette réflexion prospective. Alors au-delà de ce projet, différents enjeux de notre territoire ont été soulevés et il nous faudra aussi intégrer les problématiques d'urbanisation avec la révision du SCOT et la mise en place du PLUI. Je tenais à remercier le BRGM et ses partenaires qui nous ont accompagnés dans les différents ateliers de réflexion, des réflexions plus poussées avec une prospective participative qui nous a permis de réfléchir au devenir du territoire, Et ces exercices obligés nous ont permis de mettre en exergue à la fois le développement du territoire et la disponibilité de la ressource en eau pour demain. Encore une fois, je tiens à remercier tous nos partenaires et je remercie mes services, notamment mon directeur eau potable, Hakim Aikel, qui me représente aujourd'hui. Je vous souhaite une bonne réunion de travail, des échanges participatifs, enrichissants, et en espérant que ces gouttes de réflexion vont préserver notre grande ressource en eau potable pour demain, en vous souhaitant de belles réunions pour l'avenir et en n'ayant qu'un seul souhait, c'est préserver l'eau pour nos enfants. Belle journée à vous tous.
Thank you, Philippe. He cannot hear us, but I think we should give him a round of applause anyway. And thank you, Hakim, for organising. So our next speaker is Nathalie Barrais, who is joining us via a remote link over in France. Bonjour, Nathalie.
Bonjour à tous, bonjour à toutes.
So feel free to give us your opening remarks. Thank you.
Donc bonjour à tous, je vous remercie de m'accueillir en distanciel également. Je m'excuse par avance de ne pouvoir être présente parmi vous. Je m'appelle Nathalie Barrais, je travaille au conseil départemental du Finistère au service de l'eau potable et de l'assainissement. Et nous avons eu le plaisir de travailler avec le BRGM sur ce projet Water for Tomorrow sur un territoire finistérien et donc je tenais aussi également à remercier tous les partenaires de ce projet qui est d'importance bien évidemment dans le contexte que nous traversons. Donc je voulais vous préciser que le conseil départemental du Finistère est engagé depuis plus de 10 ans pour œuvrer pour la sécurisation des Finistériens vis-à-vis de leur alimentation en eau potable. Le conseil départemental porte et anime le schéma départemental d'alimentation en eau potable, qui a été adopté en 2014. C'était le premier schéma départemental en Finistère et dont le plan d'action se déroule jusqu'en 2030. Or, le constat aujourd'hui, c'est que les hypothèses qui ont été prises dans ce schéma sont déjà dépassées. Effectivement, dans un contexte de raréfaction des ressources en eau liées au changement climatique et à l'augmentation des besoins en eau potable, le département a souhaité travailler à la recherche et au déploiement de nouvelles solutions pour sécuriser les Finistériens pour leur alimentation en eau potable et donc de réviser d'ores et déjà son schéma départemental. Ce travail s'inscrit dans le cadre d'un projet appelé Finistère eau potable 2030, qui est porté par le département, mais bien évidemment en lien avec l'ensemble des acteurs de l'eau du Finistère. Donc la succession des sécheresses hivernales vécues ces dernières années, ainsi que la sécheresse exceptionnelle que nous avons subie en 2022, sont des situations qui risquent de se reproduire. Donc même si on ne sait pas à quelle fréquence elles se reproduiront, ce type d'événements se reproduiront, on peut craindre effectivement que les épisodes de sécheresse et de canicule soient plus fréquents. Et je dirais même en Finistère, région particulièrement normalement arrosée. Donc le BRGM, dans le cadre du projet Interreg Water for Tomorrow, recherchait un territoire pour tester de nouveaux outils afin d'optimiser la gestion de la ressource en eau au regard des perspectives du changement climatique. Et nous avons vu tout de suite l'intérêt d'appliquer une telle démarche sur un territoire finistérien, en l'occurrence celui du syndicat mixte de l'Aulne. En effet, ce syndicat qui produit et transporte l'eau potable pour sécuriser un bon quart sud-ouest du département du Finistère, sur un territoire qui couvre 6 intercommunalités, et ces collectivités produisant elles-mêmes et distribuant de l'eau potable à partir de leurs propres ressources, qu'elles soient souterraines ou d'autres surfaces. L'alimentation en eau de ces collectivités peut être fortement dépendante sur certaines périodes de l'année de la production d'eau assurée par le syndicat mixte de l'Aulne. Cette sécurisation est notamment nécessaire en période estivale, avec les fortes augmentations des besoins en eau sur un territoire qui bénéficie d'une fréquentation touristique importante, en période d'étiage, mais également lors de problèmes de qualité d'eau, de la ressource, problèmes de qualité de la ressource en eau. Donc l'enjeu est donc important de mettre en place des outils et des démarches tels que ceux qui vont être détaillés tout au long de cette journée. Et je tiens encore à remercier l'ensemble des acteurs de ce projet, de ce travail et de cette restitution aujourd'hui. Merci et bonne journée à tous.
Thank you, Nathalie, and I understand you and your colleagues in the Finistère are going to be staying with us for most of today, so I hope you enjoy the conference online. Thank you. Okay, so next up we have a project overview of the Water for Tomorrow project from Dr. Ukwuori Fadayiro, to whom we are all massively indebted for your smooth handling of the difficulties of being the project manager in a lead EU project. So thank you, Ukwuori, the floor is yours.
Okay. Bonjour à tous. Je m'appelle Ukwuori Fadayiro, but I'm afraid that's all the French I have. So I will save you from that pressure by presenting in English, but it is indeed a pleasure to have been part of, and continue to be part of Water for Tomorrow, being the project manager, now working with the Rivers Trust. Like Barrais had mentioned earlier, I was lucky to be in the initial discussions of Water for Tomorrow about 5 years ago. And there are a few familiar faces in the room. In the little corner where we had one of the discussions to start up the work, but it is rare to have an opportunity to see one piece of delivery run its full cycle. So this morning I will be talking on how we have delivered Water for Tomorrow in the sequence that you can see. Who did we work with? Who was involved in this project? How did we work? And I say we is the royal we, where we have collectively the 5 project partners that have worked in Water for Tomorrow. Now, who have we worked with? What is the scope of this study? And what has been discovered? Now, Water for Tomorrow has run for about 3 years now, from 2001 to 2023. Primarily, the aim of this project was to support the increased resilience of water-stressed areas between England and France. The project has combined local activities across these 2 nations, but largely with pieces of work that's been delivered within the 5 pilot areas. Now, the main drive of Water for Tomorrow was to be able to develop tools that will be transferable and models and processes that other stakeholders and interested water parties in the water industry would be able to use to mitigate and adapt to the threats of increased future water scarcity. It's been delivered across 5 project partners, Rivers Trust being the lead partner, and Water Resources East, the Environment Agency, and 2 partners from France, Barrais and CABBALR. Now, we say who was involved in Water for Tomorrow. I'd like to talk about who was involved in Water for Tomorrow across these 2, the 2 nations and the 5 partners. Well, believe it or not, we have over 10 specialty and expertise areas that have worked on Water for Tomorrow. We have from technical specialists to water resources specialists, technical managers, modelers, communication specialists. We've had model economists, environmental economists, hydrogeological engineers, hydrogeologists, public health specialists, as well as linguists. So it's a piece of work with the aim of being able to deliver as robust an output as possible so that we can support solutions at catchment level. Where did we work? Between England and France, we had 3 project areas in East Anglia, which Barrais had already inferred to. And in France, we have a partner, a pilot area in the south of France, and one in the north of France as well. And can be seen from the map. So CABBALR is much easier and closer to get to. And then Finistère is the south of France partners that we've worked with. Now, the transnational knowledge exchange has been the cornerstone of Water for Tomorrow, because Water for Tomorrow's partners have extensive experience, both nationally and in the EU, which this project has worked and built upon. We have applied knowledge from Water Resources East's regional work. We have applied and tapped into EA's in-depth specialty areas across the water environment. We have also built on the Rivers Trust experiences of implementing catchment-based approach. BRGM's experience of hydroecological monitoring and hydrological forecasting has also been key to delivering this project. And then, of course, the implementation capabilities of CABBALR. So, who have we worked with? Colleagues in France engaged extensively with water managers, water companies, and water syndicate groups. And in England, we had a multi-sector approach to our stakeholder engagement, working across water companies, agriculture, regulators, ENGOs, and industry. Now, the expectation from Interreg was that we will work across a certain number of areas and specialty individuals and organizations, which we had to keep a record of. But I would like to share this slide today, which my colleagues haven't seen earlier. I have a few more surprises, though. And that is to give us an idea of the extensive engagement that the project has done or carried out while delivering this piece of work in the past 3 years. Across all 5 project partners, Water for Tomorrow has met and since exceeded all the target numbers of engagement, both from the number of local authorities that we have engaged with. We're told to work with 6, but we worked with 29, to small and medium-scale enterprises, which were expected to engage with 50, but we're working with 70 and counting. And that's because we're not quite at the end of the project yet. We have a few more days before the end of March, and those numbers will sure be increasing by the time we make our final reports. So that is also just to say thank you to the project team, because while you're in the midst of delivering this piece of work, it's very easy to lose sight of how much work you've already put in from the start. So, what is the scope of Water for Tomorrow? I have some pictures in this slide that a few partners will recognize, and that is because I just didn't know any other way to actually explain the scope of this work, because their slides was just so beautifully done. So I took a few pictures from theirs. Largely, the scope of Water for Tomorrow was driven by having a better understanding on effective water resources management. Without a shared understanding between water managers and stakeholders on future requirements for water, it would be very challenging to have decisions that are taken based on information provided. And of course, when we talk about decisions, it has environmental decisions to consider, as well as investment decisions. So a lack of this shared understanding between multi-sectors and their needs and requirements across each of their deliveries was actually the driver to try to build this knowledge gap that Water for Tomorrow has addressed. Now, how did we do this? We worked to address this gap by developing innovative water management and decision support tools. But of course, management of water resources is only part of the wider challenge, but it's a good start. So what Water for Tomorrow has done was to create a shared understanding between stakeholders, working with stakeholders still in continuity to be able to co-design and build models or strategies or tools that would help catchments in making more informed water management decisions. And then, of course, in the short space of time we had, we tried to test some of these strategies that were co-designed and implement as many as we can. My next slide talks about the methodologies and processes that was used in these three key areas of Water for Tomorrow. Well, the methods delivering the project just ensured that active participation of stakeholders ran all through the life of the project. Now, the stakeholder participation was key because the essence of Water for Tomorrow is to be able to leave behind a legacy that can be worked with after the life of this project. So yes, we worked with stakeholders extensively, and they gave us their time to be able to work with us to fine-tune some of the strategies that were initially identified and worked with. But most importantly, the stakeholders had a key part to play in telling us what was important to them and how our tools will be useful to them as well. Testing and implementation of these water resources management strategies was also a key area of what Water for Tomorrow had to deliver in line with Interreg requirements. Now, what has been delivered? This was a bit of a challenge because I ran the risk of under-reporting this project. And short of pulling out the whole application form and all the reports that have been submitted in the past 2.5 years, I tried to build a graph and pull out some key points in the expectations of what we're expected to deliver from our funders. Now, these key areas you see is about 1/3 of all the lists that Water for Tomorrow was to deliver on, which partners will be happy to know, and I was quite pleased myself that we have far exceeded these targets. Now, the ones in blue are Interreg expectations in terms of workshops, and the ones in orange are what has actually been delivered. So across board, I would say this was a project well done, and I'm hoping Interreg will say the same. But I thought to show this because it kind of gives you, if we don't go away with anything today, we can go away with a picture of what the project has delivered. Now, it hasn't delivered these in isolation. All the pieces of work you see, water resources management strategies, implementation of water resources management strategies, are all captured in a manner that will be used and will outlive Water for Tomorrow. So yes, for the partners, this is the last surprise I have for you, because I haven't had a chance to see this. But I had the challenge of trying to make sure I don't underreport this project, hence the slide that you see on the screen. Now, this is also one of those numbers that will change, because I have a few days to the end of March, and it's a very active project, and some of those figures are going to go higher. So I'd like to use the opportunity to say thank you to project partners. I hope I haven't surprised you too much, but it was the only way that I could say this is what we have done collectively. Now, from the slides that you had seen in terms of what we had delivered, Water for Tomorrow has put together a guidance resource pack, which is an expectation from our funders. It's bilingual, French version and an English version, and I'll be out now. And then all these results from Water for Tomorrow are public goods. They are there to be used by the public, not just interested parties in Water for Tomorrow. And they've captured step-by-step deliverables of how all the requirements have been met, how all the pieces of work has been done, and also includes contact information for catchment groups or a group of interested parties on who they can contact across each of the organizations to support them in delivering any part of the work. So this is actually a toolkit. And with the lessons learned also within this toolkit and the next steps for delivering partners to follow, most of this work will go into legacy because every project partner has got an aspect of Water for Tomorrow they intend to carry forward. It is at this point that I will say, for today's presentation, I think you've seen the last of me. However, I have colleagues who will be coming up to present some of our outputs as case studies. That was the only way that we'd be able to address what we've done in 2.5 to 3 years in a space of a couple of hours. But it will be done in the order of understanding the stakeholder context, which is the initial parts of the project. It will fall into monitoring and drought resilience, where we've worked out models and how we worked with the models. Then it will round up with anticipating future vulnerabilities to the availability of water for the future, which will now look at how those models were run, and we may be able to see a few examples here today. I would like to say thank you, merci beaucoup, and I'll see you later. That's me done.
Thank you, Ukwuori, and really thanks for all you've done to keep the project on track, and keeping us on time today as well is much appreciated. So we now move into session 1, which is building a shared understanding of water resources. And the first presentation is a double act from Huw Richards from the Environment Agency and Andy Wendt from Essex and Suffolk Rivers Trust. So I'm not sure which order you're presenting in, but Huw, over to you.
Thank you, Barry. So I'm Huw Richards. I work for the Environment Agency as the project manager for Water for Tomorrow. My role today is to talk to you about how we went about understanding the stakeholder. It's already been alluded to by Barry in the opening statement and from Ukwuori, but I think it is worth reiterating. East of England is water stressed already before we even start talking about future demands and supply. We're very good at growing, the human race, and we continue to grow. And in the east of England, we have some of the fastest growing populations in the UK. It's estimated that we can see 3 million more people, or an increase of 5% by 2028 from 2018 levels. All of those will need houses, drinking water, etc., putting up the demand. I think it's fair to say that we all experienced climate change last year. We saw 40 degrees, heat waves, the likes of we've never seen. The predictions are that rainfalls are going to decrease by about 39%. However, I think it's worth noting that parts of Suffolk had 70% less rainfall last summer, putting unprecedented demand on our spray irrigators. And environmental protection. There has never been so much scrutiny on protecting the environment, enjoying it, restoring it to what it once was, or preventing deterioration. So we will be making sustainability reductions as the regulator to protect them. Barry mentioned the jaws of death statement. It's very telling. Simple terms, our supply is going down, our demand is shooting up. And if we do nothing, if we don't adapt, we won't have enough water for our needs. So the first part of the project was about promoting understanding that problem, all agreeing fundamentally that there is a water shortage problem coming our way, but perhaps more importantly, putting yourself in other people's shoes, other sectors' shoes, understanding what it means to them, and probably more importantly, is there a time of the year where the problem is more acute? So for example, when spray irrigators need that water. Only when we understand how much water is needed and when it is needed, can we start talking about the lovely jigsaw piece there. Starting and talking about the solutions, because solutions will have to be delivered together. Engagement. I mean, engagement's where it's at, and there's probably people in the room here, there's probably people in the Zoom wall sick of the sight of us over the last 2 years. We've been out at workshops a lot. We were hampered by the pandemic for the first year, so we became adept, I hope, at virtual engagement. We became used to Zoom and Teams and different ways of engaging with sectors, which has actually been fantastic for carbon footprints, etc. But there's nothing better than face-to-face engagement. Unfortunately, when the pandemic restrictions were lifted, we were able to go out and talk to people face-to-face in workshops and what have you. And I'd just like to take the opportunity on behalf of the EA project team and the project team as a whole to thank everybody for their engagement, because it has to be two-way. We have been delivered some quite stark messages to people about water, and it's been taken really well, and it's been very collaborative. So it's a huge thank you from me and the project team. We chose to focus on agricultural sector, and there's a reason for that. So I'm the Environment Agency, I'm a regulator. It was felt that the impacts, we're talking about water shortage in sort of 2050 timescales, the impacts are being felt now by the agricultural sector. And as the regulator, we have the powers under the Water Resources Act 1991 to restrict spray irrigators during times of drought, using Section 57 restrictions. These have historically been seen as the last resort, but we've used them twice in the last 5 years, and we've not had a fabulous start to the year with 10% of long-term average in February. We might need to use them again. So they are becoming the norm rather than the other one. They are also the dominant water user in East Anglia after water supply. And we had a really good opportunity to build on existing projects for the priority catchments that Ukwuori and Harry in the audience were working on, and Fresh for Seas, which I hope some of you have heard on. So we were really keen to build on those relationships and that work that had already been done. It's also worth noting that agricultural sector and other sectors don't have a formal planning process akin to the WINEP and the periodic review. So we wanted to start talking about conversations about how can you put in a formal planning route. It's also fair to say that there are many, many, many agricultural abstractors, some with little to no awareness, possibly, of the water shortage that was coming. So we wanted to engage as far as we could. And fundamentally, we wanted to improve our own understanding of the sector and build upon relationships to promote that trust between us and the agricultural sector. Creation of a superwag. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's nothing like that, but I think quite as exciting. Water abstraction groups were fairly disparate across the project area. It was felt that communication was maybe slightly disparate. So we decided to join them into one superwag. And we've had numerous meetings where we've been able, as the regulator, to speak to all of the water abstraction groups at once, but fundamentally listen to what they need and start that sort of collaboration in terms of understanding them and their requirements. It's also been fundamental in sharing best practice, so we were able to discuss the results of a survey, which I'll go on to in a minute. We were able to see the first sort of reiterations of the catchment management system that Ben will be presenting on later. And it allows us to discuss efficient ways of dealing with the water shortage problem. I fundamentally believe that WAGs are the route to sustainable abstraction in future. And I'm really pleased that we've had interest from Essex that has thus far been unrepresented and from outside the project area. Now, I mentioned the survey. I don't have an agricultural background, so I really wanted to understand what water shortage would mean to that sector. So I decided to come up with a short survey with Mahmoud's help and Ari's help in terms of asking some very key questions and trying to tease out what would happen to that sector with some theoretical scenarios of 20% less water or 50% less water. And we asked the superwag to promote it on our behalf. I'm pleased to say we've had 45 responses, and it's already led to some really excellent conversations about the type of crops, workforces, and what have you. So what did we find out? I'll caveat these slightly. You can see they're not based on massive response rate, but I think they really give a good indication of what may happen if we experience water shortage in the future. I'll also slightly caveat the crops in that it doesn't ask what would be grown in its stead. So when, for example, we're talking about 19 potato growers, 42% of them would stop growing potatoes with 50% less water. They may grow something else in its stead. Similarly, 14 responses on sugar beet. 57% of them would stop growing sugar beet with 50% less water. that is quite a telling statistic when you made aware that 64% of the UK sugar beet comes from East Anglia. So that's quite telling to me. And a huge statistic there. Out of 25 abstractors that answered, 92% of the workforce would be lost. And that equates to about 1,500 people. So there are huge implications to the local economy that maybe we should start thinking about in terms of water shortage at its whole. We also wanted to work out about future trends. What is this particular sector looking at in terms of being able to be resilient to future water shortage? So the question was, what actions do you want to take to adapt to future water shortage? Unsurprisingly, of the 38 people, almost half said they were looking at high flow water and storage, predominantly in winter. And this aligns with the predictions of wetter winters. Although I will slight caveat that with February and 10% long-term average, is that as reliable as we once thought? I think we have to think about the extremes as well as the norms. Notwithstanding that, I think everybody needs to be far more agile and reactive, including the Environment Agency, when these high flows occur, so that they can be captured in an agile manner. So already been said, multi-sector is the future. It's really pleasing over 2 years that we are engaging with as many people as we can. All of the groups that I'm involved in have many different sectors talking to each other about the future water shortage problem. Most of the catchment meetings that we attend, similarly, talking about multi-sector and collaboration. And I think I'll say it's nothing revolutionary, but it's really pleasing, and it builds that relationship and trust that we're all in it together, as it says there. We are all part of the problem. We all use water, so we have to all be part of the solution. A couple of thought-provoking slides. I couldn't help myself. I really like this slide. There's a lot of work to do. I will caveat it slightly in that it's a customer research piece based on water quality that Ofwat carried out last year in July. It has got quite a big response rate of 2,500 people, so it's a fair response rate. Our end users, our consumers, they eat our food, they enjoy the environment, they turn the tap on. It's the general public. So how are the general public feeling about water shortage? Are they concerned? Bearing my caveats in mind, you can see drought and water scarcity only just made it to the list of importance. So if you ask the local community, what's the most damaging negative impact on the environment, they're not seeing drought and water scarcity as a problem. Fly tipping, single-use plastics, bear that in mind, and things that they can see. We need to raise that up. We collectively need to get that moving in the opposite direction. I don't know if you can see that. Hopefully you can see a plastic bottle, very flippantly. How much do we think that bottle is worth? Pennies, perhaps? Fill it with water, slightly more. But right now, if you fill that with a certain type of flavoured water, I can't name the brand, but those with kids will understand. We can get our children to pay £10 for half a litre of water. Now, we have a water shortage problem, we have a plastic pollution problem, and we have a cost of living crisis. And yet our children are asking us to spend up to £10 on half a litre of water. The power of communication and endorsement is paramount. We have to somehow get the communication and marketing of water to be just as important to those parents and children as that particular brand, which I won't name because I'll get in trouble. Now, we've been working with a local catchment partnership, and I'd like to invite Andy Wendt to the stage to talk about some of the public engagement they have been doing. And I thank you very much for listening to me.
For inviting me to talk. East Suffolk Water for Tomorrow project was delivered in partnership with the East Suffolk Catchment Partnership. I just want to recognise the partners that were involved in the project from the partnership, who we wouldn't have been able to deliver the project successfully. This includes the East Suffolk Water Abstractors Group, the Environment Agency, both Huw Richards and Harry Condi, Sustainable Water Solutions, who facilitated our workshops, the Rivers Trust for inviting us to be part of the project in the first place, and WRE, who assisted us with the first workshop. Our project consisted of 2 workshops which were aimed to promote the awareness of water scarcity within our region. As Huw alluded to, we have got a serious problem in the east of England. To increase information dissemination through the workshops, and to promote to the public water conservation and awareness. And we did this, as I say, through 2 workshops. The first one being focused on abstractors. So we had extractor groups, we had landowners, we had local authorities, anyone who was interested, who was a water user or a water abstractor, who was involved in the use of water in some way, conservation groups, to have a say and to inform them of the problem. Now, as part of the first workshop, we actually ran a poll, and interestingly enough, there were 3 very simple questions. First one was, were you aware of the water shortage issue in East Suffolk? 97% of the responses we had said, yes, we are aware. However, later on in the workshop, we found out that not everyone was actually aware how serious that issue was. The second question, will reductions in water impact your business? The top 2 answers were very significantly, operationally and economically. And the second top answer was concerns about natural environment, which was really good to see, obviously being the Rivers Trust. The third, which was mostly reflective on agriculture, can you adapt to future water shortages? 70% gave the answer yes, they can, bearing in mind this is agricultural responses. 30% said no, they can't. So that is pretty much a third of agriculture in East Suffolk that are saying we can't cope without the water and we can't adapt without the water. I find that hard to believe, but I'm sure, given enough thought, they may be able to adapt. The second workshop was a single catchment abstractors workshop. Now, this focused on one catchment, and we engaged with industry, which was, to my note, pretty much the first time locally where we had actually engaged with the big abstractors from industry. We engaged with landowners from within the catchment, local authorities, and other water users. And we all came together to come up with solutions, ideas on how we can improve the water situation. Ideas such as instigating managed aquifer recharge, trading potentials between the various organisations. We had food producers that are putting their water to waste when it could actually be reused. We had the ideas of water reuse from effluent reuse from sewage treatment works, water treatment works. And we're working with the Environment Agency, Anglian Water, and the rest of our partners to see how we can actually make this happen, to see within one catchment whether we can use that as a pilot to move things forward and to give a example for the rest of the catchments within East Suffolk. Our other part of the project was to deliver a social media campaign to raise awareness. Now, it just so happens that we had an extremely dry summer last year, so that actually helped. We sent out about 50 engagements through various social media platforms, and had a massive response. As I say, I was probably promoted slightly because of the dry weather we had, but just to give you an idea of how successful it was, we reached out to just under 5,000 people through the social media responses. Facebook, sorry if I'm not supposed to mention their name, but I have, just under 3,000 page visits. And this is all on water conservation. I think that was quite remarkable. I don't think we'd have hit those numbers any other way. And it was really encouraging to see that people were taking such an interest. It's only a quick 5-minute talk from me, and that's me done. But thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Huw, for those presentations. Next up, we have Alison Furber, colleague from the Rivers Trust, who's going to talk about participatory modelling that's been developed in the Water for Tomorrow project.
Right, thanks, Barry. Hi, good morning, everybody. So yes, I think what's already clear from today is that finding solutions to the problem of water scarcity is really challenging. In each of the catchments that we're working in, we've got multiple stakeholders, and all of them need water for a really wide variety of purposes. We're also trying to manage really complex environmental systems. So I think that the problem is that each stakeholder looks at the problem of water scarcity from a really different perspective, and acting independently, what all too often happens is that the actions of one stakeholder can exacerbate the challenges being faced by another. Without a shared understanding of the problem being faced, it's really difficult for stakeholders to collaborate and to find those kind of creative solutions that are in their collective best interest. So I don't know if you know the story of the blind men and the elephant, but in the story, there are 6 blind men, and they go to the palace of the Raj because he has an elephant, and they want to understand what an elephant is. So each of the men reaches out and touches the elephant, but then they get into a huge argument about whether an elephant is like a snake, or whether it's like a tree, or whether it's like a rope. It's a really good analogy for the problem that we face when we're trying to find solutions to the problem of water scarcity. I'm a technical specialist, and I'm touching the trunk of the elephant, and I'm trying to explain to, let's say, a farmer that the elephant is like a snake. The farmer, of course, thinks that I'm completely mad because to them, the elephant feels like a rope. We need an approach that helps us to develop a shared understanding that lets us collate our experiences so that we can kind of develop a shared understanding of our water resources, of our catchment's water resources challenges, and it enables us to explore the inevitable trade-offs of change. So through Water for Tomorrow, we have been trialling an approach that we hope will help us to achieve just that. It's called participatory modelling, and we're really, really excited about it. So what we did was we categorised all our stakeholders into sectors, and then we used simple modelling techniques based on a modelling approach called systems dynamics to help each sector map out the problem of water scarcity as they experience it from their own perspective. We then integrated all of those sector models into a single model, which is a whole system visualization that represents stakeholders' shared understanding. And what I should probably point out is the next step in this process would be to then quantify those models, at which point you get a kind of simulation model. But for Water for Tomorrow, we've been focusing on qualitatively mapping out the system in its entirety. So in a moment, I'm going to show you an example of one of the sector models, and then I'm going to walk you through how we integrated the models together. But before I get to that, I just want to kind of introduce some of the fundamental concepts of the modelling approach that we used. So Variables are the building blocks of models. A variable is any factor that can change in quality, quantity, or size that we think it's important to account for to solve our problem. So here you can see two variables. We have water demand and water stress. Variables are connected by causal links, which you can see here as purple arrows. And causal links can either be positive or negative. So in this case, if water demand increases, water stress will increase. And likewise, if water demand reduces, water stress will reduce. So a change in the first variable leads to a change in the second variable in the same direction. Those two variables have a positive causal relationship. If we add water availability into the mix, if water availability increases, then water stress will reduce. And if water availability decreases, water stress will increase. So a change in the first variable causes a change in the second variable in the opposite direction. So those two variables have a negative causal relationship. There's one special type of variable that I just want to introduce called a stock. Stocks are a type of variable that appreciate or depreciate over time, and their values are changed by flows. So the classic analogy used to explain stocks is the bathtub. The water in the bath is the stock. If you turn the tap on, the bath will fill. That's the stock accumulating. If you turn the tap off and pull the plug, then the water in the bath will start to go down. That's the stock depreciating. So anytime in our model, when we want to be able to track the state of variables that accumulate or depreciate over time, we use stocks. And stocks are shown as blue rectangles. They're changed by flows, which are shown as blue arrows. Okay, so let's move on to look at one of the sector models. This is a part of the agricultural sector model. So the story that the agricultural sector wanted to tell is that farms are businesses and they need to be profitable if we're going to have a thriving agricultural sector. The problem with water scarcity is that it impacts on profitability. And if that continues for long periods of time, then we might see farmers selling up and moving out of either the catchment or out of farming altogether. And that has a significant impact on our food security. And not only that, if we're not growing food, then we're importing. And often we're importing from other catchments that are experiencing even greater environmental challenges than we are in our own. So I think when we're working with stakeholders to put together these models, what we're trying to do is we're trying to identify the really important feedback loops that kind of control the system's behaviour. It's the loops that give the system its dynamics. I'm going to refer you now to the guidance pack. In the guidance pack, you'll find links to our participatory modelling sector story maps. So for each of the sector models, there's a full write-up. And so, for example, for the agricultural sector model, that story map will walk you through the entire model link by link. It'll introduce some of the key outcome measures of interest, such as food security. And it'll also talk about how options, in this case something like winter storage perhaps, might help to alleviate water stress in the catchment. So please do refer to those for further information. So here you can see the 6 sector models that make up the whole system. I just want to highlight that as we were putting the whole system model together, we actually decided to split the regulatory model between the 5 other models because it just made a lot more sense like that. But what I'm going to do now is just run you through how these models are connected. So in the centre, the hydrological model sits in the centre. It's really kind of like the nerve centre of the whole system. The hydrological model maps out all the factors that influence how water moves through our catchments. And one of the key outputs of this model is river flow, which links into the surface water that's available for abstraction. So the hydrological model sends information to the agricultural, industry and water company models about how much water is actually available for abstraction. Each of those models then maps out the factors that influence how much water that their sector actually needs, and then depending on the amount of water that's available and the needs of the sector, that will determine how much water the sectors are actually abstracting, and that information gets sent back to the hydrological model. The agricultural model also sends information about land use change back to the hydrological model. A second important output of the hydrological model are hydroecological parameters. So that's things like what's the flow in the river, what proportion of that flow is made up of base flow, what's the moisture content of the soil, things like that. All that information gets sent to the ecological model. Now the ecological model maps out how the factors that influence how suitable the environment is for different types of habitat, and it will send that information back to the hydrological model. All right, so why is that useful? Well, our hypothesis at the start of the project was that this approach would be beneficial because each sector would see their concerns incorporated into the problem framing in a really tangible way. When stakeholders see the things that they care about being included in that whole system visualization, it sends the message that their concerns are being factored into decision making. They feel confident that their interests are being accounted for. Now, going back to our analogy of the elephant, this whole system model is basically a sketch of an elephant. It helps each sector to see how the bit of the elephant that they have experience of is connected to the rest of the elephant. So let's say that I'm over here. I'm primarily concerned with the ecology of the system, and I'm trying to explain how some initiative or other is going to impact on habitats. Well, this model explains to somebody in industry, for example, why it is that they need to care about that. So overall, we found that the approach brought many benefits for the Water for Tomorrow project, and it's an approach that we plan to continue using and developing. But one further benefit that I just want to highlight is the accessibility of the approach. Technical models tend to be built by specialists, and they can become black boxes with stakeholders really separated from that process of building the model. Well, participatory modelling opens up the process of building models across all stakeholders, and it allows them to engage with that process. So the theory is that if stakeholders understand the model because they've helped to build it, then they'll have more confidence in it. We hope that the work that we've carried out through Water for Tomorrow will have an impact beyond the project. So our work should be of direct interest and relevance to others experiencing problems of water scarcity in other catchments. But actually the techniques and approaches that we've used are really widely applicable. And so please do have a look at the guidance pack. And if it's an approach that you're interested in, then do feel free to get in touch with us. Oh, my last slide seems to have gone, but it was just the, anyway. So, developing a shared understanding of a problem is really foundational to finding finding solutions to the problem of water scarcity. Okay, and what we found is that the participatory approach, it could be really beneficial in terms of our ability to develop that shared understanding by helping us to define the problem more holistically. So thank you very much.
Well done, Alison. Thank you, Alison. That's fascinating insights that really need to understand it a bit more. Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so just a reminder for everybody to submit your questions onto Slido. We have a super panel coming up at the end of the next session of all the speakers in this and the next together. So please make sure you put your questions into the Slido. So the last presentation from this speech is from Kelly Hewson-Fisher, who is the National Water Resources Specialist at the National Farmers Union. We've heard a lot about stakeholders in this first session, and so Kelly, welcome you to the stage to give a farming perspective. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for the invite to speak here today. And already it's great to hear the importance of the agriculture and horticulture sector being highlighted today here. So as we've seen in the 3 catchments that have been highlighted and where Water for Tomorrow is working, agriculture and horticulture is extremely important. Across East Anglia, agriculture holds approximately 80% of the abstraction licences, and so significant in these conversations. When we talk about water for food and why access to water is important for those sectors, it's really important to understand the breadth of the importance. So we're talking about water for food production, we're talking about quantity and quality of produce that's being produced. We're talking about food security, as we've heard. You know, are we willing to rely on the level of imports that we currently do? The NFU has produced its horticulture growth strategy, and one of the 10 building blocks of success and growth is access to water. We look at employment, and I'll come on to some of the comments that Huw made from the survey. But 3.8 million people employed in the UK through the agri-food industry. We look at ecosystem services, we look at tourism, agriculture, horticulture, all playing a significant role in all of those. And we look at local and national economics and the growth. And again, agriculture and horticulture, the UK agri-food sector being worth £110 billion. So we talk about water for food, we talk about access to water, and we talk about the importance, but we need to remember the breadth of the importance of that. Okay, so looking at the Water for Tomorrow project and looking at how it's supported the work, and we're really keen to see how these outputs and these outcomes continue to develop to support the agriculture sector going forward. So the first one that we spoke about was Water Resources East and the multi-sector approach to water resources planning. So looking at how we can square the round hole and the square peg, looking at our water resources requirements for 2050 and beyond. And that will take a collaborative approach and a multi-sector approach in order to meet those requirements across all sectors. And bearing in mind what we've just spoken about regarding the breadth of water for food and the importance of it, we need to ensure that we are protecting access to water for food production. Huw talked about the water abstractor groups, and I'm still not sure where the name SuperWAG came from. I'm blaming Huw. But looking at how water abstractor groups are essential and key to this conversation, where they are developed and where they are supported going forward. And does that SuperWAG group look at the work to develop on a national level? So do we start looking at other water abstractor groups in other hotspot areas, not just in East Anglia? But that's something the water abstractor groups need to develop as they go through. Looking at the work that Harry's done on the heat maps with another water abstractor group and really highlighting the significance of the challenge as we move forward, really pinpointing where those pinch points are with water security, water resilience is key. And the survey work, so we've just heard about the participatory model from Alison, we'd heard about the survey work from Huw. So that survey, the results from that, I often do present at many meetings to be able to highlight the importance of water for food and the impact of reduced availability and what that would have. So Huw, you put up there a 20% reduction in water availability and the impact it would have on businesses and the 50%. And if we take that figure that you mentioned, about a 92% reduction in the workforce on a 50% reduction, and we look at the figure that I mentioned of 3.8 million employed over the UK food and agri businesses, we're talking of a significant amount of people being lost in employment. if we do reduce that access to water. So going forward, data, planning, engagement, communication and collaboration, all absolutely key, ensuring that we can build resilience in our water resources for agriculture sector. We're really keen, as I mentioned, to see how the outputs of this project are taken forward by abstractors, by the sector, to ensure that we can build that resilience and build that sustainability that we require. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kelly. So that concludes the last of our presentations in this first session, and we'll now have a break. If you could all come back here promptly for 11:30 start, that would be great. The slight change of chair, so Julia Beedon will be chairing the next session. And I'd just like to thank all of the speakers once again for this morning. Thank you very much. If you didn't know already, coffee is through the doors there in the boardroom. Thank you.
Thank you.